She appeared pregnant at the millionaire's door with bruises, saying, "I need help." He was a lonely millionaire. What began as shelter turned into forbidden passion. If you enjoy love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The fog covered Oak Ridge Valley like a cloak of poorly kept secrets, enveloping the dormant vineyards and old mansions in an almost palpable melancholy. Ethan Blackwell's black Mercedes cut through that grey veil with the precision of a blade, while his thoughts wandered among the shadows of a past he had sworn to bury. At 35, he carried on his face an expression carved by time and bitterness, strong features inherited from a lineage he preferred to forget, green eyes that hid more stories than they revealed. The return to town had not been a choice, but a necessity. As the sole heir to the Blackwell wine empire, his presence was required to finalize the sale of the properties, a fortune built on foundations of violence and secrets, watered with the blood of the weak and the silence of accomplices. Ethan adjusted the rear-view mirror, observing his own image reflected, the impeccable Italian suit, the black hair slightly graying at the temples, the wine-colored silk tie that matched the car's interior. A perfect shell to hide the scars he carried. The narrow streets of Oak Ridge Valley remained practically unchanged, as if time had chosen that place to take a pause. The same colonial houses, the same century-old trees, the same provincial air that suffocated any attempt at modernity. The rain was starting to fall, first in timid drops, then in a dense curtain that blurred the contours of reality. It was then that she appeared, like an apparition between the curtains of water. A staggering female figure, simple dress soaked, brown hair stuck to her pale face. Ethan instinctively reduced speed, something in the desperation of that scene alerting him beyond reason. The woman was now on her knees, one hand on her belly, the other leaning on the iron gate of an abandoned mansion. He should have continued. His life had been built on the premise of not getting involved, of keeping a safe distance from others, tragedies. But there was something in that scene that paralyzed him, perhaps the distant echo of another woman, on another rainy night, when he was too young to understand, too small to help. Ethan parked the car, took the umbrella from the back seat and got out. His Italian shoes sank into the mud as he approached the stranger. Up close, he could see that she was young, no more than early 20s. There was a trickle of blood running from the corner of her lips, and her eyes, deep and frightened brown, seemed to struggle to maintain focus. "My boyfriend beat me," her voice came out as a whisper broken by the rain. He found out I was pregnant." The world seemed to freeze for a moment. Ethan felt the weight of those words like a punch to the stomach. Memories he preferred to keep locked began to leak from the corners of his mind. Night screams, doors, slamming. His mother fallen at the foot of the stairs. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to push away the ghosts. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice maintaining the professional composure that years of negotiations had honed. "Sarah." She coughed, and more blood stained her lips. "Sarah Collins." Ethan noticed that she was trembling, not just from cold but from fear. Her floral dress, now a second soaked skin, revealed the subtle curves of an early pregnancy. There were purple marks beginning to form on her exposed arms, and a small but deep cut near her temple. "You need a hospital," he said, more as a statement than a suggestion. Sarah shook her head violently. "I can't. He'll find me there." "David?" "He knows everyone at the hospital. His father is a police officer." The mention of the police made Ethan grip the umbrella handle tighter. Oak Ridge Valley was too small for secrets, too big for justice. He knew well how that system worked. The same families, the same silent agreements, the same rot masked as tradition. "Come with me." The words left his mouth before he could contain them. "I have a house in the hills. You'll be safe there until—" "You decide what to do." Sarah raised her eyes to him, distrust mixed with desperation. "Why are you helping me?" It was a valid question, one he was asking himself at that moment. Ethan adjusted his posture, maintaining an appropriate distance while extending the umbrella over her. "Because sometimes we just need to do what's right." The answer sounded empty even to his own ears, but it was all he could offer at that moment. Sarah tried to stand up, but her legs weakened. Ethan instinctively supported her, feeling the warmth of her body through the wet clothes. She was small in his arms, fragile like an injured bird, but there was a silent strength in her gaze that intrigued him. The path to the car was slow, each step measured so as not to frighten her even more. Ethan opened the passenger door, helped her settle in, and turned on the heater. The luxurious interior of the Mercedes contrasted violently with Sarah's simplicity, her unpolished nails, the cheap cotton dress, the worn-out shoes. As he drove along the winding road leading to the hills, Ethan observed Sarah from the corner of his eye. She had curled up in the seat, arms hugging her own waist, as if trying to protect the life growing inside her. Her breathing was irregular, and occasionally she touched her belly with trembling fingers. The Blackwell house emerged through the fog like a ghost of stone and glass, an imposing early-century construction, surrounded by abandoned vineyards, and a garden that had long ago lost the battle against time. Ethan parked under the covered garage, turned off the engine, and remained silent for a few seconds. "No one will look for you here," he finally said. "You can stay as long as you need." Sarah nodded slightly, still without looking directly at him. "Thank you, Mr. Ethan. Just Ethan." I'll continue this translation, maintaining the story's elements while adapting character and place names to American ones. He led her into the house, through corridors decorated with old paintings and furniture covered with white sheets. The place had the heavy air of absence, as if it had been waiting for years for some kind of redemption. In the library, Ethan lit the fireplace while Sarah remained standing in the center of the room, looking even smaller, surrounded by shelves that went from floor to ceiling. "I'll get dry clothes and make some tea," he announced, keeping his voice neutral. "The master suite bathroom is at the end of the corridor to the right. There are clean towels in the cabinet." Before he could leave, Sarah called out to him, "Why did you come back to Oak Ridge Valley?" Ethan stopped at the door without turning around. "To bury the past." "And is it working?" A bitter smile formed on his lips. "Apparently not." When he returned with a tea tray and some old clothes from his mother, he found Sarah still standing, watching the rain through the French windows. There was something hypnotic about her presence, a vulnerability that awakened long-dormant instincts in him. "You should change," he suggested, placing the tray on a side table. "I don't want to be responsible for pneumonia." Sarah took the offered clothes with a silent thank you and disappeared down the corridor. Ethan poured himself a finger of whiskey, needing the alcohol to calm his nerves. What was he doing, bringing a stranger home, getting involved in a situation that would clearly only bring problems? He wasn't that kind of man, not anymore. When Sarah returned, wearing a light blue dress that once belonged to his mother, Ethan felt something contract in his chest. The delicate fabric fell softly over her form, revealing a natural elegance that the old clothes couldn't hide. Her hair, still damp, formed dark waves that framed a face that, cleaned of blood and initial fear, revealed itself to be surprisingly beautiful. The dress? Was it someone special's? She asked, noticing his fixed gaze. "My mother's," Ethan replied, turning to serve the tea. "She died a long time ago." "I'm sorry." Sarah's voice was soft, genuine. "What was she like?" Ethan extended a cup to her, considering the question. "Kind, strong, broken." "How did she die?" "The same way many women in Oak Ridge Valley do," he replied, his voice carrying an old weight. In silence. Understanding passed through Sarah's eyes like a shadow. She brought the cup to her lips, blowing gently on the hot liquid. For a moment, only the crackling of the fireplace and the drumming of the rain filled the environment. "He'll look for me," Sarah finally said. "David isn't the type who gives up easily." "Let him look," Ethan replied, his voice taking on a harder tone. "This house has its own secrets, and some of them are useful in moments like this." Sarah studied him over the rim of her cup, as if trying to decipher the enigma he represented. "You don't seem like the type of man who shelters strangers in danger. And what type of man do I seem like? The type who keeps distance, who has built walls so high that you can't even see beyond them." The observation hit him with uncomfortable precision. Ethan walked to the fireplace, watching the flames dance. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've forgotten what it's like to care. Then why are you helping me? He turned to face her, meeting those brown eyes that seemed to see through his carefully constructed defenses. Because sometimes walls need to fall. The night advanced, and with it, the storm only seemed to increase. Sarah eventually fell asleep on the library sofa, wrapped in an old blanket. Ethan remained awake, sitting in his leather armchair, watching the rain and thinking about how his life had completely changed in a matter of hours. Tomorrow he knew he would have to deal with the consequences of his decision. Oak Ridge Valley did not forgive those who defied its unwritten rules, and sheltering the pregnant girlfriend of David Thompson, son of the most corrupt sheriff in the region, was definitely a breaking of those rules. But for now, on that rainy night in a house full of ghosts and secrets, Ethan allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, there was still room for redemption in his life. Dawn arrived with a grayish clarity that infiltrated through the high windows of the library. Sarah awakened slowly, disoriented by the sumptuousness of the surroundings. For a moment she remained motionless, letting the memories of the previous night return like fragments of a nightmare. David's hands on her neck, the dull thud of her body against the wall, the desperate escape in the rain. And then, him, Ethan Blackwell, the stranger with green eyes who had saved her. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her sit up quickly, a defensive reflex that her body had learned in recent weeks. But it was only Martha, the elderly housekeeper whom Ethan had introduced the night before retiring to his office. "Good morning, child," Martha smiled, placing a breakfast tray on the side table. "The master asked to serve you right here. Said you needed to rest." Sarah observed the tray: fresh bread, fruits, steaming coffee, a small vase with a single white rose. A breakfast worthy of a magazine, so far from her rushed mornings at the bakery where she worked. Her stomach protested, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since lunch the day before. "Mr. Blackwell." "Left early," Martha completed, adjusting the heavy curtains. "Had business in town, but left express orders for you to make yourself at home and not leave the property." Sarah nodded, feeling a confused mixture of gratitude and apprehension. She was sheltered in the house of a man she barely knew, depending on his protection, when just 24 hours ago, her biggest concern was balancing the month's accounts with her minimum wage. After breakfast, Sarah explored the house with the cautious curiosity of a cat in unfamiliar territory. The place was a monument to old wealth: oil paintings, Persian rugs, furniture that seemed to have its own stories to tell. But there was also an air of abandonment, as if life had been drained from its rooms long ago. In the second-floor corridor, a sequence of black and white photographs caught her attention. They were records of the Blackwell family through the decades: austere men in dark suits, women with contained smiles. In one of them, she recognized a younger Ethan, perhaps in his 20s, next to an elegant dark-haired woman. His mother, she presumed, noticing the same melancholy in the eyes of both. "Mrs. Elizabeth," Martha's voice appeared behind her, carrying an old sadness. She was a soul too gentle for this family. "How did she die?" Sarah asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Martha hesitated, her wrinkled hands squeezing her white apron. "Officially, fell down the stairs, but in this town, child, official truths are rarely the real ones." The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted the conversation. Sarah approached the window, her heart accelerating when she saw Ethan's Mercedes parking. But he wasn't alone. A woman descended from the passenger side, tall, elegant, with a bearing that exuded sophistication in every movement. "Victoria Pierce," Martha murmured, a tone of disapproval in her voice. "The ex-fiancée." Sarah felt something contract in her chest. Of course, a man like Ethan would have a romantic past worthy of his social position. Victoria was exactly the type of woman who matched that house, that world. From the window, she observed the couple enter the house. Victoria walked, too close to Ethan, her gestures soft but intimate, like someone reclaiming familiar territory. Sarah retreated to the shadows of the corridor, suddenly conscious of the borrowed dress she wore, of her bare feet, of her intrusive presence in that environment. "Where is she?" Victoria's voice, melodious but cutting, echoed through the entrance. "Oh, Victoria." Ethan's tone was a warning. "Oh, darling, don't look at me like that. I'm just curious about your guest. The whole town is already talking, you know? The Blackwell heir sheltering the pregnant girlfriend of the sheriff's son. What a lovely scandal." Sarah felt the blood freeze in her veins. Less than a day, and her presence was already known. David would know in a matter of hours, if he didn't already. "My private life is not a subject for gossip," Ethan replied, his voice taking on an icy tone that Sarah had not yet heard. "Your private life affects business, darling, and since we're about to close the merger between our wineries, the merger is a separate matter. Nothing is separate in Oak Ridge. Valley, you know that better than anyone." Victoria paused, her heels hitting the marble floor as she walked. "But I didn't come here to argue. I brought the contracts you asked for. Shall we review them in the office?" Sarah waited until the footsteps faded away to descend the stairs. She needed to leave. Her presence was causing problems for the man who had helped her, and she already carried enough guilt. "Don't even think about it, child." Martha appeared again, as if reading her thoughts. "Out there you won't last a day. Sheriff Thompson has eyes everywhere." "But I can't stay." "I'm causing problems." "Master Ethan isn't a man to care about problems." Martha took her hand, guiding her back to the library. "Besides, there's more history between the Blackwells and the Thompsons than you can imagine." The rest of the afternoon dragged on like an eternity. Sarah could hear occasional voices coming from the office, Victoria's soft tone, Ethan's monosyllabic responses. She tried to distract herself with books from the shelves, but her mind kept returning to Victoria's feline elegance, to the intimacy with which she treated Ethan. It was already night when the library door finally opened. Ethan entered, his tie loose, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it many times. "Sorry for the delay," he said, serving himself a drink. "Business." "Your fiancée is very beautiful," Sarah commented, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Ex-fiancée," he corrected, turning to face her. "And Victoria is complicated." "Like me." A bitter smile curved his lips. "No, you are genuine. Victoria is like an adulterated wine, seems perfect until you taste the bitter end." Sarah felt her heart race at the comment. It was the first time Ethan had shown any kind of personal opinion about her. "Why did you break up with her?" Ethan walked to the window, observing the night falling over the vineyards. "Because she wanted the Blackwell name more than she wanted me. And I was already tired of being just a name. And what do you want to be?" He turned slowly, his green eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made Sarah hold her breath. "Free." The silence that followed was charged with something new, a different tension that made the air seem denser. Sarah could feel her heart beating against her ribs, too aware of Ethan's masculine presence, of the way the firelight created shadows on his angular face. "How are you feeling?" he finally asked, his voice hoarser than normal. "Safe," she replied without thinking, "for the first time in a long time." Ethan took a step in her direction, then stopped, as if he had reached an invisible limit. "You shouldn't feel safe. With me, Sarah, I'm not a good man. Good men don't save strangers in the rain. Maybe I have other motives." "Like what?" He closed his eyes for a moment as if waging an internal battle. When he opened them again, there was a dark determination in his gaze. "Like the fact that your presence here is the best revenge I could have against the Thompsons. A move that will destabilize decades of power in this town." Sarah felt as if she had been slapped. "So that's it? I'm just a piece in your revenge game?" "No," Ethan replied quickly, his voice betraying an emotion that his words tried to deny. "But you should be. It would be simpler if you were." "What do you mean?" He crossed the distance between them in 3 large steps, stopping close enough for Sarah to feel the heat of his body, the soft aroma of his cologne mixed with whiskey. "I mean, I can't stop thinking about you. About how your eyes shine when you smile, even after everything you've been through. About how strong you are without realizing it. About how your presence is beginning to make this house feel like a home again." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "And that's dangerous. For both of us." Sarah felt her entire body vibrate with those words. Without thinking, she extended her hand and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his unshaven beard under her fingers. Maybe I want that danger. Ethan's eyes darkened with contained desire. For a moment, Sarah thought he was going to kiss her. Her whole body yearned for it, for a touch that wasn't marked by violence, for a kiss that spoke of desire and not possession. But Ethan pulled back, though his eyes remained fixed on her, as if he wanted to memorize every detail of her face. You're pregnant with another man's child. A dangerous man, and I have too many demons to offer anything but problems. What if I don't care about your demons? You should. He walked to the door, his posture rigid, as if each step required immense effort. Good night, Sarah. She remained alone in the library, her body trembling with the intensity of the moment that had just passed. Through the window, the moon began to appear between the clouds, casting a silvery light over the abandoned vineyards. Somewhere in town, she knew David was looking for her. Victoria was plotting her next moves, and the secrets of the Blackwells continued buried like deep roots under that soil rich in stories. But that night, lying on the antique sofa with her heart racing and her skin still tingling where she had touched Ethan's face, Sarah allowed herself to dream of possibilities, of a love that didn't hurt, of a future that was more than survival. And for the first time since she discovered the pregnancy, she felt hope. The morning brought with it a suffocating heat, the kind that makes the air seem too dense to breathe. Sarah woke to the sound of raised voices coming from the entrance hall, a discussion in controlled tones but loaded with tension. She silently approached the library door, her heart accelerating as she recognized David's voice. Where is she, Blackwell? David's voice had that false cordiality that Sarah knew well, the tone that preceded his worst moments of violence. You know you're protecting a liar, don't you? A gold digger who got pregnant on purpose to manipulate me. I have nothing to discuss with you, Thompson. Ethan's voice was pure ice. I suggest you leave my property before I call the police. A dry laugh echoed through the hall. The police? My father is the police in this town, forgot. But you know that better than anyone, don't you? After all, it was the Blackwells who helped build this system. I am not my father. No, you're worse. At least your father had the courage to dirty his own hands. You hide behind this veneer of civility, pretending you're better than all of us. Sarah could feel the tension growing even through the closed. Sarah, her hands were trembling, and the baby in her womb seemed agitated as if responding to the stress of the moment. Last chance, Thompson. Leave. She's here, isn't she? I can smell her cheap perfume. The sound of something hitting against the wall made Sarah start. When David spoke again, his voice was choked, as if he was being pressed against something. Let me go, you son of a... Listen. Carefully. Ethan's voice was low, almost a whisper, but laden with a threat that made Sarah shudder. If you touch her again, if you even look in her direction, I'll make sure every dirty secret your family buried comes to light. And believe me, I know where all the bodies are. Are you threatening me? I'm making a promise. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of retreating footsteps and a door slamming. Sarah waited a few minutes before leaving. The library, finding Ethan standing in the middle of the hall, his fists clenched, his breathing heavy. You shouldn't have done that, she said softly. Now he'll come back angrier. Ethan turned to her and Sarah caught her breath. There was something wild in his eyes, a contained fury that made him even more magnetic. Let him come back. He walked up to her, stopping just inches away. I need to show you something. Without waiting for a response, he took her hand and led her through corridors she didn't yet know, until they reached a locked door in the basement of the house. The environment smelled of damp earth and aged wine. This is the old wine cellar, Ethan explained as he unlocked the heavy door, but it's also an archive. The interior was a labyrinth of old wine racks and dusty shelves. Ethan guided her to the back, where a private bookcase held boxes and folders organized by date. My father was a methodical man in his corruption, he said, pulling out a yellowed folder. He kept records of all his dirty business, including those with the Thompson family. Sarah took the folder with trembling hands. Inside she found documents, photos, receipts, evidence of decades of corruption, violence, and abusive power. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand that you're not alone in this fight." Ethan moved closer, his body emanating a heat that made the already dense air of the cellar seem even more suffocating. "And because I need you to trust me completely for what's coming." "And what's coming?" He touched her face gently, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, as if memorizing every curve. "Justice, revenge, redemption. Choose the name you prefer." Sarah closed her eyes, allowing herself to melt under that touch. When she opened them again, she found Ethan's gaze fixed on her lips. "And if I don't want revenge," she whispered. "And if I just want—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan's lips found hers with an urgency that took her breath away. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was hungry, desperate, as if both were drowning and finding air in each other. His hands wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer while hers tangled in his hair. The kiss tasted of danger and promise, of shared secrets and truths yet to be revealed. Sarah could feel his heart beating against hers, fast and strong like a war drum. When they finally separated, breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "This is madness," he murmured. "Maybe it's exactly what we need." He kissed her again, more softly this time, as if trying to memorize the moment. But the sound of footsteps upstairs brought them back to reality. "Martha must be looking for us," Ethan said, reluctantly pulling away. "And we have much to plan." Sarah nodded, still dazed by the kiss. As they climbed the stairs back to the real world, her mind spun with possibilities and fears. The baby moved in her womb, like a silent reminder of everything that was at stake. In the hall they found not just Martha, but also Victoria, who observed them with a calculated smile. "Interrupting something?" she asked, her eyes wandering from Sarah's slightly rumpled clothes to Ethan's disheveled hair. "What are you doing?" "Here, Victoria." "Oh, darling, did you forget? We have that lunch with the investors today." She approached, adjusting his tie with a studied intimacy. "And I have news about our special project." Sarah felt her stomach turn at the scene. Victoria was like a snake, beautiful, elegant, and deadly precise in her attacks. "I'll get ready," Ethan said, his voice returning to its professional tone. "Sarah, stay with Martha. I'll be back in the late afternoon." Before leaving, he cast one last look at Sarah, intense, full of silent promises. Victoria observed the exchange with sharp eyes. "You know, dear," she said as soon as Ethan disappeared down the corridor, "men like Ethan Blackwell don't fall in love with girls like you. They might have fun, of course, even develop a temporary obsession, but in the end they always return to their own world." "I'm not looking for love," Sarah replied, holding her gaze. "No?" Victoria smiled, cruel and beautiful as a blade. "Then, why are you still here?" The question hung in the air like poison, even after Victoria left. Sarah spent the rest of the morning in the library, rereading the documents Ethan had shown her, trying to understand the puzzle of power and corruption that linked the families of Oak Ridge Valley. But her thoughts kept returning to that kiss, in the cellar, to the way her entire body seemed to vibrate in Ethan's presence, to the danger and promise that each moment with him represented. Martha found her at dusk, still lost in thoughts. "The master called," the housekeeper said softly. "He'll be longer than expected. Ask to lock the doors well tonight." Sarah nodded, feeling a shiver of apprehension. Outside, the sun was setting in tones of blood over the vineyards, and the night promised to be long. Very long. Night fell over Oak Ridge Valley like a heavy mantle of secrets. Sarah remained awake in the library, restless, each noise from the old house making her heart jump. Victoria's words echoed in her mind like a poisonous mantra, mixing with the memory of Ethan's kisses in the cellar, creating a storm of doubts and desires. The wall clock marked almost midnight when she heard the characteristic sound of the Mercedes at the entrance. His footsteps were different from usual, heavier, hesitant. When Ethan finally appeared at the library door, Sarah understood why there was blood on his white shirt. "It's not mine," he said before she could ask, closing the door behind him. His voice was hoarse, tired. David found me in the restaurant parking lot, wanted to resolve things his way. Sarah rose in an impulse, running to him. Even under the weak light of the fireplace, she could see the bruises forming on his face, the cut on his lower lip. What happened? Ethan took her hand before she could touch his bruised face. He lost. A bitter smile curved his lips, making him wince in pain. But this is just the beginning. Victoria, she's playing both sides. What do you mean? He led her to the sofa, serving himself a generous dose of whiskey before continuing. The special project she mentioned? It's a partnership with the Thompsons. They want to use the winery merger as a front for money laundering. And Victoria, he downed the whiskey in one go, Victoria is pregnant. The news hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. With whose child? David's. The word left his lips, like poison. Apparently they've been having an affair for months, since before my return. Sarah felt the world spin. Victoria and David. The circle of lies and betrayals was bigger than she imagined. Why did she tell you? Because she wants me to claim the child. Ethan laughed, a sound without humor. A business deal, she said. I give the Blackwell name to the baby. She ensures the Thompsons don't interfere with the property sales. And what are you going to do? Ethan stood up, walking to the window. The full moon bathed the vineyards in silver, creating shadows that danced like ghosts among the dead vines. What I should do is accept. It would be the safest move, the most logical. He turned to face her, his green eyes shining with a feverish intensity. But I can't. I can't even think about touching Victoria after you. Sarah felt her heart accelerate. She rose from the sofa, walking toward him as if pulled by an invisible thread. Ethan, you've been under my protection for less than a week, he continued, his voice low and intense, and you've already turned my world upside down. When I'm near you, all my plans for revenge, all the carefully constructed strategies seem insignificant. Is that bad? It's dangerous. He touched her face with trembling fingers. You make me want things I can't have. A different life. A future that isn't stained with blood and lies. Sarah covered his hand with hers, turning her face to kiss his palm. Who said you can't have that? All my past. This entire town. Then let's leave. The words came out before she could contain them. After the baby is born, we can start. It's over somewhere else, away from all this poison. Ethan closed his eyes, as if the idea was too painful to contemplate. It's not that simple. Why not? Because... He hesitated, and Sarah saw something break in his gaze. Because there's more blood on my hands than you imagine. The man David mentioned today, about my father dirtying his own hands, he was talking about the murder of my mother's lover. Sarah felt the air escape from her lungs. What? I found a letter years ago. My mother, she had an affair with one of the winery employees, a man named James Collins. He mysteriously disappeared shortly after my birth. Ethan moved away from her, as if he didn't deserve her touch. My father found out, and the Thompsons helped cover up the crime. Why are you telling me this now? Because you need to understand the kind of family you're getting involved with, the kind of man I am. Sarah took a step toward him, then another, until she was close enough to feel his warmth. The man you are saved my life, saved my child's life. She took his hand, placing it on her belly, and is the only man who has ever made me feel truly safe. Ethan trembled as he felt the gentle movement beneath his palm. His eyes met hers, and Sarah saw in them a storm of emotions, desire, fear, hope. I can't promise a happy ending, he whispered. I don't want promises. Sarah rose on her tiptoes, her lips inches from his. I just want you. Now. With all your demons. The kiss that followed was different from the first. There was no urgency this time, just a growing intensity that made every nerve in Sarah's body vibrate. Ethan's hands slid down her back, pulling her closer, while hers explored his chest over the blood-stained shirt. When he began to trace kisses down her neck, Sarah let out a low moan, that seemed to break something inside him. In a fluid movement, Ethan lifted her into his arms. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice hoarse with desire. In response, Sarah kissed him again, putting into that kiss all the feelings that words couldn't express. Ethan carried her out of the library, climbing the stairs to his room on the second floor. The moonlight entered through the high windows, painting silver shadows on their skin as clothes fell like revealed secrets. Each touch was a confession, each kiss a promise that transcended words. Afterward, lying with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat return to normal, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known for months. The baby moved gently, as if approving the moment. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, tracing the old scars on his torso. "About how you changed everything." Ethan kissed her hair. "About how, for the first time in my life, I have something more important than revenge. And that scares you?" "It terrifies me," he laughed softly. "But it also makes me feel alive, truly alive." The sound of a car on the road made both tense. Headlights briefly illuminated the room before disappearing around the curve. "They won't leave us in peace, will they?" Sarah asked, even though she already knew the answer. "No." Ethan pulled her closer. "But they won't separate us either. Not now." Sarah closed her eyes, letting herself be enveloped by his warmth, by the aroma of his skin mixed with the wooden perfume of the old house. Outside, the night kept its secrets and tomorrow was full of uncertainties. But there, at that moment, in the arms of the man who should have been her enemy but had become her safe harbor, Sarah finally understood what it meant to belong, what it meant to love without fear. And for the first time, she didn't care about the price they would have to pay for this love. Dawn brought with it a mist that covered Oak Ridge Valley like a cloak of secrets poorly kept, enveloping the dormant. Vineyards and old mansions in an almost palpable melancholy. Sarah awoke to the sound of an engine cutting through the morning silence. Looking out the window, she saw a police cruiser approaching the house, and her heart nearly stopped. Sheriff Thompson himself was stepping out of the vehicle, his posture rigid with authority, his expression unreadable beneath his official hat. Two deputies flanked him as they approached the front door. Sarah dressed quickly, her hands trembling as she pulled on the clothes Martha had left for her, simple jeans and a loose blouse that concealed her growing belly. By the time she reached the landing, voices were already rising from the entrance hall. "This is an official search, Blackwell," the sheriff's voice echoed through the house. "I have a formal complaint of kidnapping and false imprisonment." "Where's the girl?" "There's no girl here, Sheriff." Ethan's voice was controlled, but Sarah could sense the underlying tension. "And I suggest you present a warrant before invading my property." A dry laugh cut through the air. "Warrant? In this town? You know better than that, son. Your father never needed warrants to do what needed to be done." "I'm not my father." "No, you're not. Your father knew his place in the scheme of things, knew that certain arrangements need to be maintained for everyone's good." Sarah moved silently toward the stairs, her heart beating so loudly she was sure they could hear it from downstairs. "Times have changed, Sheriff." Ethan's voice took on a dangerous tone. "And I have enough evidence to change them even more." "Are you threatening me, boy?" "I'm reminding you that your empire of corruption is sustained by documents that could easily reach the federal bureau in Washington." A heavy silence followed his words. When the sheriff spoke again, his voice had lost its pretend cordiality. "You have 24 hours to hand over the girl. After that, not all the Blackwell money will protect you." The sound of the front door slamming made Sarah release the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Seconds later, Ethan came up the stairs, his face a mask of concern. "We need to leave," he said, beginning to take clothes from the wardrobe. "It's not safe here anymore." "Where are we going?" "I have a country house in the mountains, a few hours from here. Few know of its existence." He paused, turning to her. "But first I need to resolve something." Sarah felt a shiver of apprehension. "What?" "Victoria." Ethan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Sarah already recognized as a sign of tension. "She must be behind the complaint. I need to confront her, ensure she doesn't cause more problems. I'll go with you." "No." He held her face between his hands. "It's too dangerous." Martha will help you pack what's necessary and take you to the mountain house. I'll meet you there by nightfall. What if something happens to you? A sad smile curved his lips. Nothing will happen. Not now that I finally have a reason to live. The kiss that followed was intense, loaded with unspoken promises and fears. Sarah could feel the tremor in his hands, the urgency in his lips, as if he wanted to memorize every second. When Ethan departed, the sound of the Mercedes disappearing down the road, Sarah felt a familiar emptiness settle in her chest. Martha found her still standing at the window, watching the dust settle on the path. "Come, child," the housekeeper said softly. "We have much to do and little time." The following hours were a blur of activity. Martha, with an efficiency born of years of service, organized bags with the essentials: clothes, documents, money. She also insisted that Sarah eat something, even though her stomach was too knotted to accept more than some toast. It was during the improvised lunch that Sarah noticed something strange in Martha's behavior. The housekeeper seemed restless, constantly checking the clock, casting nervous glances out the window. "Something's wrong, isn't there?" Martha hesitated, her wrinkled hands squeezing her apron. "Master Ethan, he shouldn't have gone alone." "Why?" "Because Victoria isn't alone. David spent the morning at her house." Martha lowered her voice, as if the walls themselves could hear. "And I saw Sheriff Thompson's car parked around the corner." Sarah's blood froze in her veins. "It's a trap." "Probably." "We need to warn him." Sarah stood up, but Martha grabbed her arm. "And that's exactly what they want, for you to leave the protection of this house." "But Master Ethan is smarter than he looks, and he has his own resources." Martha guided her back to the chair. "The best way to help him is to follow the plan. Go to the mountain house and wait." The housekeeper's words made sense, but every fiber of Sarah's body screamed to do something, anything. The baby moved in her womb as if sensing her agitation. The sound of the telephone cut through the tense silence like a razor. Martha answered, her face paling as she listened. "Was it him?" Sarah asked as soon as the housekeeper hung up. "No." Martha seemed to have aged 10 years in seconds. "It was Victoria. She said that Master Ethan had an accident." The world seemed to spin around Sarah. "What kind of accident?" "I don't know. She wants you to go to the county hospital. Says it's serious." "It's a lie," Sarah said, but her voice trembled. "It has to be a lie." "It probably is." Martha took her hands in hers. "But what if it's not? What if he really needs help?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision on her shoulders. If it was a trap, she would be delivering exactly what they wanted. But if Ethan was really injured, alone, "I'll go there." "Sarah, I can't abandon him, Martha." She touched her belly, feeling the baby move. "He didn't abandon me when I needed him. And now he's all I have." Martha observed her for a long moment before nodding. "Then I'll go with you." "No, I need you to go to the mountain house as planned. If something happens to me, Ethan will need to know where to look." The housekeeper tried to argue, but Sarah remained firm. Half an hour later, she was in a taxi heading toward the county hospital, her heart beating to the rhythm of a silent prayer. Please let him be okay. Please don't let it be too late. The hospital rose like a grey fortress against the afternoon sky. Sarah paid the taxi and walked to the reception, each step echoing like a premonition of fate. "Ethan Blackwell," she said to the receptionist. "I was told he was admitted here." The woman consulted the computer, frowning. "We have no record of anyone by that name coming in today." Sarah's initial relief lasted only a second. A heavy hand landed on her shoulder, and the voice she feared most whispered in her ear. "Welcome back, sweetheart." David. David's touch on her shoulder was like ice against her skin. Sarah felt her entire body freeze as memories of violence and fear flooded her mind. The baby moved restlessly in her womb, as if it also recognized the danger. "Don't make a scene," David whispered, his voice falsely sweet. "There's a patrol car outside, and my father is eager to see you." Sarah looked around, noticing for the first time the averted gazes of the hospital staff. No one would intervene. No one ever intervened in Oak Ridge Valley when it came to the Thompsons. "Where's Ethan?" A cruel smile curved David's lips. "Worried about your new lover? Don't worry, Victoria is taking very good care of him." He led her out of the hospital, his grip on her arm strong enough to leave marks. A police cruiser waited at the side of the building, Sheriff Thompson at the wheel. "Finally," the sheriff said when David pushed her into the back seat. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your touch, son." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat, seeing the shared smile between father and son. The same cruelty, the same perverse pleasure in the power they wielded. The journey was short and silent. When the car stopped, they were in front of an old house on the outskirts of town, the Thompson Mansion. Sarah knew that place well. She had spent months there, trying to convince herself that David's love compensated for his moments of violence. "Victoria is waiting for us," David announced, pulling her out of the car. "She has some interesting things to tell you about. Your precious Ethan." The interior of the mansion was as Sarah remembered, opulent, suffocating, with that peculiar smell of power and decadence. Victoria waited for them in the office, her red dress contrasting with the dark decor. There was something different about her face, a cruel satisfaction that made Sarah's blood freeze. "Darling," Victoria smiled, indicating a chair. "Sit down, we have so much to talk about." "Where is Ethan?" "So predictable," Victoria sighed, serving herself a glass of wine. "Always Ethan. You know, I really thought he was smarter, that he would understand the game we're playing, but then—" She laughed, a humorless sound. "Then he had to fall in love with you, a pregnant shop girl. What a waste." Sarah remained silent, her hands instinctively protecting her womb. Victoria continued, "You should have seen his face when I told him about the baby, about David being the father. For a moment I thought he was going to kill me." She took a sip of wine. "But then I showed him the photos." "What photos?" Victoria gestured to David, who opened a folder on the desk. The scattered images showed Sarah at various moments over the last few months, entering clandestine clinics, talking to suspicious people, receiving envelopes. "You were very careless, darling," Victoria smiled, "thinking you could fool David with this pregnancy story. The photos clearly show your attempts to get a fake test to set up this whole theater." "That's a lie." Sarah stood up, but David forced her back into the chair. "Those photos are fake." "True or false, it doesn't matter." Sheriff Thompson spoke for the first time since they entered. "What matters is that Ethan believed them." Sarah felt her heart stop for a moment. "No, he wouldn't believe—" "Oh, but he did," Victoria laughed. "You should have seen how devastated he was. The great Ethan Blackwell, deceived by a fifth-rate con artist. It was delicious." "Where is he?" Sarah asked again, her voice trembling. "Probably on his way back to Italy by now," Victoria shrugged. "After I showed him the photos, he finally understood that our agreement was the best option. My baby will have the Blackwell name, the wineries. We'll be merged and everyone wins." She smiled, caressing her still flat belly. "Well, almost everyone." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling hot tears run down her face. It couldn't be true, not after the previous night, the way he had touched her, the way he had looked at her. "I don't believe you." "You don't need to believe me," David approached, his heavy hands landing on her shoulders. "You just need to understand your place. You're going to come back home with me, have this baby, and never mention Ethan Blackwell's name again." "And if I refuse?" Sheriff Thompson laughed. "Then things get interesting. See, we have enough evidence to arrest you for attempted extortion, and prisons can be very dangerous places for pregnant women." The fear Sarah felt wasn't for herself, but for the life she carried. Her baby, the only thing truly hers, in the hands of these monsters. It was then that she heard it. Distant but unmistakable, the sound of Ethan's Mercedes. Victoria heard it too. Her face lost its color for a moment before composing itself. "Impossible," she murmured. "He should be—" The office door burst inward. Ethan was there, his impeccable suit stained with blood, a deep cut on his temple. But it was his eyes that made Sarah catch her breath. There was something wild in them, a primitive fury that transformed his aristocratic face into something almost unrecognizable. "I knew you would come." Victoria recovered first, her voice trembling slightly. "You were always so predictable when it comes to lost causes." "Shut up." Ethan's voice was pure ice. His eyes found Sarah's, and she saw in them not disbelief or betrayal, but a love so fierce it made her heart ache. Sheriff Thompson drew his gun, but Ethan didn't even blink. "I would be careful with that gun, Sheriff, especially considering that the Federal Bureau is at this moment receiving a very interesting dossier about your activities over the last 20 years. "So you're bluffing," David growled. "I am my father's son, remember?" Ethan smiled, a humorless smile. "I learned early on to always have a plan B and a C and the rest of the alphabet." Victoria stepped forward. "Ethan, be reasonable. Think about what you're throwing away. The empire we can build together." "Empire?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "You still don't understand, do you? I don't want any empire. I don't want power. I don't want revenge." His eyes found Sarah's again. "I just want her. I just want a chance to do something right in this cursed life." The silence that followed his words was broken by the sound of sirens in the distance. Sheriff Thompson's face paled. "What have you done?" "Me?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I just followed my father's example. I kept records of everything, every dirty deal, every covered-up death, including—" He looked directly at Victoria. "Including the real reason for my mother's death." Victoria staggered as if she had been slapped. "What are you talking about? Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That your father, the doctor who certified my mother's accident, wouldn't leave evidence?" Ethan shook his head. "She discovered the child trafficking scheme you operated at the clinic. She was going to report everything. So my own father has authorized the accident." The sirens were closer now. David made a move toward the door, but Ethan was faster. In seconds, he had Sarah in his arms, protected against his chest. "It's over," he said simply. "Your empire, the lies, the power, it's all over." The sound of cars parking and authoritative voices filled the air. Sarah buried her face in Ethan's chest, feeling his heart beat strong and safe against her cheek. "You came," she whispered. "I'll always come," he replied, his lips in her hair. "I'll always find you." The rest happened as in a dream. Federal agents invading the mansion, Victoria and the Thompsons being taken away in handcuffs, reporters appearing like vultures to record the fall of one of the most powerful families in Oak Ridge Valley. But Sarah could only focus on the warmth of Ethan's arms. On the way, he refused to let go of her even while giving his statement, as if he feared she might disappear if he didn't keep her close. When they finally were alone in the back seat of his Mercedes, Ethan touched her face with trembling fingers. "Thought I had lost you," he whispered. "When Martha called me, when I knew you had gone to the hospital, you never believed her lies?" "Not for a second." He smiled, that smile that was only hers. "You are the only truth I've found in this city of lies." Sarah kissed him then, a kiss tasting of tears and promises, of endings and new beginnings. The baby moved between them, as if sealing that moment. "Where do we go now?" she asked when they separated. Ethan started the car, guiding it out of the Thompson property for the last time. "Wherever you want. The world is too big for us to remain trapped by ghosts." Sarah intertwined her fingers with his over the gearshift, watching Oak Ridge Valley disappear in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the road stretched like a promise of freedom. And for the first time, the future didn't seem frightening. It seemed possible. It seemed right. The first rays of sun were already painting the horizon when Ethan's Mercedes finally arrived at the mountain house. It was a smaller and more welcoming construction than the Blackwell mansion, surrounded by a wild garden and a breathtaking view of the valley below. Martha waited for them on the porch, her wrinkled hands twisting her apron with concern. "Thank God," the housekeeper murmured, hugging Sarah as soon as she got out of the car. Her attentive eyes examined the bruises on the young woman's arm, the marks left by David's fingers. "I thought..." "We're fine," Sarah reassured her, feeling the baby move as if to confirm her words. "It's over." But it wasn't over, not completely. The next weeks were a whirlwind of testimonies, investigations, and revelations that shook Oak Ridge Valley to its deepest foundations. The Thompson corruption scheme was bigger than anyone imagined, involving politicians, businessmen, and even judges. Victoria was the first to make a plea deal, trading her freedom for information. Her supposed baby with David never existed. It was just another manipulation in her power game. Sheriff Thompson tried to kill himself in prison, but survived to face decades of incarceration. David disappeared before being arrested, but his name was on every wanted list in the country. Ethan sold the winery, but not in the way he initially planned. He transformed it into a cooperative, dividing the property among the employees who for generations had made the Blackwell fortune. It was his way of trying to correct some of the mistakes of the past. The mountain house became a refuge for Sarah and Ethan, a place where they could heal their wounds away from the gazes and whispers of the town. Martha remained with them, her presence an anchor of normality amid so many changes. On a particularly warm September afternoon, as the sun set behind the mountains, Sarah found Ethan in the office, bent over old papers. "What is that?" she asked, sitting in the armchair next to him. Her belly, now 7 months along, made movements slower and more deliberate. Records from Victoria's father's clinic. Ethan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Sarah now associated not with tension, but with deep concentration. I'm trying to find James Collins." Sarah felt her heart accelerate. "Your mother's lover." "My biological father," he corrected gently. "The dates correspond, and there are records of a winery employee who was treated at the clinic after an accident around the time of my birth. After that, he simply disappeared. You think he's still alive?" "I don't know." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting hers. "But I need to know. I need to understand who I really am before—" He hesitated, his hands instinctively going to her belly. "Before our son is born." Sarah covered his hands with hers. In recent weeks, Ethan had become increasingly protective, more involved with the pregnancy. The baby, which at first was just another complication in their lives, had become a symbol of new beginnings, of redemption. "You are the man I love," she said simply. "The man who risked everything to save me, to save us." She guided his hand to where the baby was kicking. "And you'll be an amazing father, regardless of your blood." Ethan kissed her then, a slow and deep kiss that spoke of gratitude, of love, of silent promises. When they separated, there were unshed tears in his eyes. "Marry me?" The question came out so naturally that for a moment Sarah thought she had imagined it. But then she saw the seriousness in his face, the love mixed with vulnerability in his gaze. "What? Marry me," he repeated, firmer this time. "Not because you need to, not because it's right or expected, but because I want to wake up every day by your side. I want to raise this baby with you. I want to build a life that isn't stained by the sins of our parents." Sarah felt tears run down her face. "Are you sure? After everything?" "After everything," he interrupted her. "I'm only more certain. You saved me, Sarah, not just from revenge or hatred, but from myself." "Yes," she whispered, pulling him in for another kiss. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The sound of Martha clearing her throat at the door separated them. The housekeeper was smiling, her eyes shining with contained tears. "Dinner is served," she announced. "And there's a call for you, Master Ethan, from the federal police." Ethan stood up, kissing Sarah's forehead before following Martha. Sarah remained in the armchair, her hands caressing her belly as she watched the last ray of sunlight disappear behind the mountains. Outside, the wild garden was beginning to awaken with the first fireflies of the night. It was different from the formal garden of the Blackwell mansion, freer, more authentic, like the love she had found in Ethan's arms. The baby moved again, stronger this time, as if sensing her happiness. Sarah smiled, thinking about how unpredictable life was. A few months ago, she was trapped in an abusive relationship, fearing for her child's future. Now, the sound of quick footsteps brought her back to the present. Ethan was standing at the door, his face pale, a paper trembling in his hands. "What is it?" she asked, feeling her heart tighten. "They found him." His voice was hoarse. "They found James Collins." Sarah stood up as quickly as her belly allowed. "Where?" "In a nursing home in Colorado." Ethan swallowed hard. "He's alive, Sarah. My father, my real father, is alive." She hugged him then, feeling his body tremble with contained emotions. The baby moved between them, as if understanding the importance of that moment. "We'll go together," she whispered against his chest. "We'll meet him together." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Through the office window, the first star of the night shone in the sky, like a promise that some endings can be not only happy, but true. And sometimes, thought Sarah, it's in our deepest scars that we find our greatest strength, our greatest capacity to love. The Pine Ridge Nursing Home was nestled among the rolling hills of Colorado, a complex of white buildings surrounded by well-tended gardens. Sarah held Ethan's hand tightly. As they descended from the car, feeling how he trembled slightly. After 5 hours of travel, they were finally there, moments away from an encounter that could change everything. "He doesn't know we're coming," Ethan murmured, helping Sarah climb the steps to the entrance. Her 7-month belly made each movement more cautious. The social worker thought it better that way. The interior of the nursing home was clean and welcoming, with walls decorated by paintings done by the residents themselves. A nurse guided them through silent corridors to an internal garden, where several elderly people were enjoying the morning sun. "There," the nurse discreetly pointed. "Mr. Collins is near the rosebed." Sarah felt Ethan catch his breath. James Collins was sitting on a wooden bench, his wrinkled hands carefully tending to a rosebud. He was a tall man, even sitting down, with skin darkened by time and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "Do you want me to go with you?" Sarah asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "I need to do this alone." She watched. As he crossed the garden, his steps hesitant like those of a child learning to walk, James raised his eyes when Ethan approached, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. "I would know those eyes anywhere." James's voice was deep and gentle, carrying a soft southern accent. "They're her eyes? Elizabeth's?" Ethan staggered as if he'd taken a blow. You knew who I was?" "Since the moment I saw you in the newspapers, son." James indicated the space beside him on the bench. "The press covered the fall of the Thompsons quite extensively, and you're the spitting image of your mother," Sarah observed from the garden entrance, silent tears running down her face as father and son began a conversation decades overdue. She saw when James took an old photo from his pocket, he and Elizabeth, young and smiling among the vines. She saw when Ethan began to cry, his shoulders shaking with contained sobs as James embraced him. An hour later, Ethan signaled for her to approach. His eyes were red, but there was a peace in his face that Sarah had never seen before. "James," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is Sarah, my fiancée, and this," his hands touched her belly with reverence, "is your grandson." James's eyes filled with tears. "May I?" he asked, extending a hand toward Sarah's belly. She nodded, and the elderly man's gentle touch was rewarded with a strong kick from the baby. "He's got strength," James laughed. "Like his mother." "Like his father's," Sarah corrected gently, her eyes meeting Ethan's. The following hours were filled with stories of love, of loss, of survival. James told them about how he met Elizabeth, how their love blossomed among the vines of the Blackwell vineyard, how they discovered the pregnancy and planned to run away together. "But your father," Richard Blackwell found out. James passed his hand over his wrinkled face. "They ambushed me on my way back from work. I was beaten, left for dead. When I woke up, I was in a hospital in another state, without documents, without memory." "Victoria's father's clinic," Ethan completed, his voice tense. "Yes. I spent years trying to recover my memories, trying to understand who I was. When I finally managed, it was too late. Elizabeth was dead, and you—" He looked at Ethan with sadness. "You were already a grown man, heir to the Blackwell Empire. Why didn't you look for me?" "Fear," James admitted. "Fear that you would hate me for abandoning you both. Fear that you might be like Richard." "I was never like him," Ethan said firmly. "And now I know why." The sun was already setting when they finally said goodbye. James made them promise they would return, that they would bring the baby when he was born. There was still so much to share, so many years to recover. On the way back to the mountain house, Sarah observed Ethan driving in silence, processing everything that had happened. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About how strange life is," he replied after a moment. "I spent so much time trying to be different from the man I thought was my father, and all this time I was the son of love, of the kind of love that moves mountains, that survives time and distance." Sarah intertwined her fingers with his on the gear shift. "Like ours." Ethan brought her hand to his lips, kissing it softly. "Better, because our love won't be interrupted. It won't be stained by lies or violence." "It won't," she agreed, caressing her belly. "We'll write our own story." When they arrived home, Martha was waiting for them with tea and fresh cookies. The housekeeper immediately noticed the change in Ethan. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Later, lying in bed with moonlight filtered through the curtains, Sarah watched Ethan sleep for the first time, without nightmares. His face was relaxed, almost youthful, as if he had finally found peace. The baby moved and she smiled, thinking about how life had mysterious ways of healing old wounds, of transforming pain into love, fear into hope. "Your father is an amazing man," she whispered to her belly, "and now you have two grandfathers to love you, to teach you that family isn't about blood or name, it's about love, about choices." Outside, the night was clear and starry, as if the sky itself was celebrating the revealed secrets, the truths finally freed. And Sarah knew with a certainty that came from the deepest part of her being that some loves are predestined, that some hearts need to break to learn to love truly. And that sometimes it's in the most unlikely stories that we find our greatest strength, our true family. October arrived, painting the mountains with more intense shades of green, bringing with it an energy of renewal that seemed to permeate every corner of the mountain house. Sarah, now 8 months pregnant, observed the preparations for her wedding with a mixture of anxiety and fascination. Martha had transformed the garden into a veritable paradise of white flowers and climbing vines, and the scent of jasmine filled the air like a promise of better days. "Isn't it too much?" she asked one afternoon, watching the housekeeper coordinate the installation of yet another flower-covered pergola. "It'll just be us, James, you and a few close friends." Martha paused her work, wiping her forehead with her apron. "Child, after everything you two have been through, you deserve a celebration worthy of fairy tales. Besides," she smiled conspiratorially, "Master Ethan is loving it. I've never seen him so involved in something that wasn't business." It was true. Since the meeting with James, Ethan had subtly changed. There was a lightness in his gestures, a different way of smiling. He spent hours on the phone with his father, recovering stories, building bridges over the abyss of time that separated them. And every detail of the wedding received his personal attention, as if each choice was a way of affirming that this was real, that this was forever. "Found you," his voice sounded behind her, followed by strong arms enveloping her expanded waist. "You should be resting." Sarah leaned back against his chest, feeling the baby move as it always did when hearing its father's voice. "I was just admiring Martha's work. It looks like a movie set." "Nothing less would be adequate for you." Ethan kissed her neck softly. "Besides, I have a surprise." "Another one?" He guided her to the office where an old box rested on the desk. Sarah recognized the Blackwell emblem carved into the wood. "What is this?" "Something Martha found in the attic of the mansion," Ethan opened the box carefully, revealing a vintage wedding dress delicately preserved in tissue paper. "It was my mother's. She never got to wear it. She was saving it to run away with James." Sarah touched the fabric with reverence. It was a simple but elegant dress, with French lace and small pearls sewn by hand. "Ethan." Her voice failed with emotion. "James told me they were planning to marry in secret, start a new life far from here." He took her hands in his. "I thought maybe you could fulfill her dream, transform an interrupted love story into a new beginning." Tears ran down Sarah's face. "Are you sure? It's such an important memory." "It's perfect," he whispered, drying her tears with soft kisses. "Like you." The sound of the telephone interrupted the moment. It was James calling to confirm his arrival the next day. Since their first meeting, he had become a constant presence in their lives, even if, from a distance. His stories about Elizabeth, about the love they shared, helped Ethan fill in the gaps of his past, to better understand who he really was. "I brought something for you," James said on the phone, his voice carrying that southern accent that had already become familiar. "Some old photos I found and letters your mother wrote but could never send." Sarah observed Ethan's face change as he listened, that expression that always appeared when he spoke with his father, a mixture of joy and pain, of time lost and found. Later, lying in bed with moonlight coming through the window, Sarah felt Ethan's fingers tracing gentle patterns on her belly as they talked about names for the baby. "If it's a girl," he said softly, "I'd like to call her Elizabeth." Sarah covered his hand with hers. "And if it's a boy?" "James." He smiled against her hair. "To remember that sometimes we need to lose everything to find who we really are." The baby kicked hard, as if approving the idea. Sarah laughed, turning to face him. "Did you know that when I first saw you, that rainy night, I thought you were the coldest man I'd ever met?" Ethan traced the line of her jaw with his fingers. "And I thought you were just another problem to solve, just another lost soul in need of salvation. And now I know you were my salvation." He kissed her, softly. "You taught me there's strength in vulnerability. That love isn't weakness." Sarah deepened the kiss, feeling that familiar desire grow between them. The pregnancy had made each touch more intense, each sensation deeper. "3 days," she whispered against his lips. 3 days, and we'll officially be a family." "We already are a family," Ethan replied, his hands sliding over her body with reverence. "The paper will just confirm what our hearts already know." The love they made that night was slow and deep, laden with promises and certainties. Afterward, as Sarah slept in his arms, Ethan remained awake, watching the moon cross the sky like a silent blessing. Somewhere in the house, Martha was preparing the last details for the ceremony. In a nursing home in Colorado, James was probably reviewing the stories he wanted to share, the memories he needed to transmit. And there, in that room bathed in moonlight, a new love story continued to be written. A story that began with rain and fear, with secrets and pain, but that was blossoming into something stronger than the past, truer than any empire built on lies. The baby moved again, and Ethan smiled, thinking about how destiny had mysterious ways of correcting old injustices, of transforming tragedies into new beginnings. In 3 days, he would be marrying the woman who had turned his world upside down. In a few weeks, he would be a father. And for the first time in his life, the future didn't seem like a burden to carry, but a promise to celebrate. Outside, the garden prepared for the wedding rested under the stars, the white flowers shining like small earthly moons. And inside the room, 2 hearts beat in unison, proving that some loves are strong enough to heal generations of pain, strong enough to create new beginnings. The wedding day dawned with a golden light that seemed to bless every detail of the garden. Sarah awoke alone. Ethan had insisted on following the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony, spending the night in the old caretaker's house with James. Elizabeth's dress rested on a mannequin by the window, the old lace capturing the morning light like pearl-woven spiderwebs. Martha entered the room carrying a breakfast tray and a yellowed envelope. "I found this among Mrs. Elizabeth's things," she said, handing the envelope to Sarah. "I think she would want you to read it today." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the old letter. The handwriting was elegant, but there was an urgency in the words that made her heart tighten. My son, if you are reading this, it means I wasn't strong enough to change our story, but I want you to know that every beat of my heart was a struggle to give you a different future. A future where love isn't imprisonment, where your name isn't your sentence. James, your true father, taught me that love is like wine. It needs time, truth, and freedom to become something extraordinary. Don't let the Blackwell name poison your capacity to love. Don't let power become more important than truth. And when you find someone who makes your heart dance like the vines in the wind, don't hesitate. Don't make my mistake of waiting too long. True love is too rare to be wasted. With all my love, your mother, Elizabeth. Sarah didn't realize she was crying until she saw a tear stain the old paper. Martha embraced her in silence, her wrinkled hands offering the comfort that words couldn't express. She would be so proud, the housekeeper whispered, of both of you. The following hours were a whirlwind of preparations. Elizabeth's dress fit perfectly as if it had been made for her, gracefully accommodating her belly. Martha pinned white flowers in her hair, and James, who had come to check if everything was all right, stood frozen at the door of the room, silent tears running down his face. You look exactly like her, he said softly. The same light in your eyes, the same gentle strength. From the garden came the sounds of the final preparations. The few guests, close friends, some loyal employees from the old winery, were already starting to arrive. But it was a different noise that made Sarah approach the window, the unmistakable sound of a police cruiser. The police? She whispered, her heart accelerating. James approached, his face tense. Don't worry, I'll handle this. Sarah watched him descend the stairs, with a dignity that years of suffering hadn't erased. Through the window, she saw him approach the cruiser, from which stepped a federal agent she recognized from the investigations. They found David, Martha said quietly, also observing the scene. I heard Ethan commenting on it yesterday with James. He was trying to flee to Mexico. A wave of relief washed over Sarah's body. It was as if the last ghost of her past had finally been exorcised. The baby moved as if sensing her emotion. It's time, Martha announced, helping her with the veil. Your future awaits. The garden was transformed. A corridor of white flowers led to a pergola covered with jasmine, where Ethan waited. When Sarah emerged from the house, supported on James's arm, the expression on Ethan's face made her heart skip a beat. He was magnificently elegant in his dark suit, but it was his gaze that captured attention, a look of pure love, of admiration, so deep it made the air seem denser. When his eyes found his mother's dress, silent tears began to run down his face. James led Sarah to the improvised altar, but before handing her hand to Ethan, he did something unexpected. He took from his pocket a gold chain with 2 old wedding rings. They were ours, he explained, his voice choked. Mine and Elizabeth's. We never had the chance to use them, but maybe you can transform our unfinished story into something new. Ethan embraced his father, a strong embrace that seemed to want to compensate for decades of absence. Sarah felt the baby move vigorously, as if it also wanted to participate in that moment of healing and union. The ceremony was simple but deeply emotional. When it came time for the vows, Ethan held Sarah's hands in his green eyes shining with an intensity that made the world around disappear. Sarah, he began, his voice hoarse with emotion. You found me when I was lost in the shadows of my own name. You showed me that there is light even in the darkest places, that there is hope even in the most tragic stories. You not only gave me a future, you gave me a present, a family, a reason to believe in new beginnings. And I promise, with every beat of my heart, to honor that gift, to protect you and our son with all the love that exists in me, to be the man you deserve, the father our child needs. Sarah tried to contain her tears as she spoke. Ethan, when you found me that rainy night, I was running away, not just from David but from myself, from the fear that had consumed me for so long. You didn't just offer me shelter, you gave me courage to face my storms. You showed me that true love doesn't hurt, doesn't imprison, that we can be strong, together without losing our essence, and I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you that some loves are strong enough to heal generations of pain. So Stigi, when Elizabeth and James's rings were exchanged, when their lips met in a kiss that sealed not only their love, but a new story, Sarah felt something change in the air. It was as if the universe itself sighed, as if ancient curses were finally broken. The party that followed was intimate and joyful. James danced with Sarah, telling stories about Elizabeth that made everyone laugh and cry. Martha served a special wine that she had kept for years, waiting for a worthy occasion. And Ethan didn't take his eyes off his wife for a second, as if he feared she might disappear if he didn't watch her. It was during one of these dances, when the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in pink and gold, that Sarah felt the first contraction. "Ethan," she whispered against his chest, "I think your son or daughter has decided they want to join the party." The momentary panic in his eyes was quickly replaced by a serene determination. In minutes, the garden was transformed into a coordinated birth operation. Martha, who had experience as a midwife, took command. James went to fetch the doctor, who was already on standby in town. And so on the same day that two love stories were officially united, a new life decided to make its entrance into the world. As if destiny wanted to ensure that this new chapter began in the most perfect way possible. The master bedroom was quickly prepared, and as the sun set on the horizon, as the guests anxiously waited in the garden, Sarah began another kind of journey, one that would transform that day of celebration into something even more extraordinary. The night was just beginning, and, with it, a new generation of Blackwells was about to be born. A generation born not of power or tradition, but of true love and redemption. The labor extended throughout the night like an intense symphony of pain and hope. Sarah, still wearing Elizabeth's dress now partially unbuttoned, gripped Ethan's hand as the contractions increased in frequency and intensity. Martha moved through the room with the calm efficiency of someone who had helped bring many lives into the world, preparing hot water, clean towels, and the instruments the doctor might need. "Breathe, my love," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling, slightly as he wiped the sweat from Sarah's forehead. "I'm here, I won't leave your side." Dr. Rebecca arrived shortly after nightfall, bringing with her an air of calm competence that helped soothe everyone's nerves. After examining Sarah, she smiled. "This baby is in a hurry," she announced. "I think it really wants to participate in its parents' wedding party." James waited in the corridor, his calloused hands fingering an old rosary, as he murmured prayers in a mixture of English and African languages he had learned from his own mother. The scent of jasmine still lingered in the air, now mixing with the aroma of herbs that Martha burned in a small incense holder, an ancient ritual to bless new beginnings. The hours dragged on, marked by Sarah's moans and the increasingly tight grip of her hand in Ethan's. At one point, when the pain seemed unbearable, she began to cry. "I can't," she sobbed. "I'm not strong enough." Ethan leaned in, his lips close to her ear. "You are the strongest person I've ever known, stronger than all the Blackwells combined, stronger than any empire built on lies. You are pure love and courage, Sarah, and our son is almost here." As if responding to his father's words, the baby chose that moment to make its final descent. Dr. Rebecca took position, her instructions clear and firm, cutting through the tense air of the room. "Now, Sarah, I need you to push with all your strength." The scream that followed seemed to contain all the pain and all the love in the world. Sarah squeezed Ethan's hand with superhuman strength, her body arching with the final effort. And then, the cry. Loud, strong, indignant. The first protest of a new life against the cold of the world. Dr. Rebecca lifted the baby with a radiant smile. "It's a boy. A beautiful baby boy." Ethan cut the umbilical cord with trembling, tears flowing freely down his face, as the doctor placed the small bundle on Sarah's chest. The newborn had skin in a perfect golden tone, a harmonious mixture of James's heritage and Sarah's family. And his eyes, when they finally opened, were a deep green, Elizabeth's eyes. "James," Sarah whispered, touching the perfect little face with gentle fingers. Our little James. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, enveloping mother and son in a protective embrace. James William Collins Blackwell, he completed, smiling at the housekeeper, who was now openly weeping. To honor all the strong people who brought us here. James was called in to meet his grandson. When he entered the room and saw those green eyes, so identical to those of the woman he had loved and lost, the normally composed man fell to his knees beside the bed. "It's a miracle," he murmured, gently touching the little hand that closed with surprising strength around his finger. "A true miracle." The night advanced outside, but inside that room time seemed suspended in a bubble of pure happiness. Martha prepared tea and cookies for everyone, insisting that Sarah needed to eat to regain her strength. Dr. Rebecca remained for a few hours, ensuring that mother and son were perfectly well before departing, with the promise to return the next morning. When they finally were alone, Ethan, Sarah, and little James, the silence that fell over the room was like a prayer of gratitude. The baby slept peacefully on his mother's chest, his small fists clenched, as if holding all the dreams of the world. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, kissing Sarah's forehead with reverence. "For what?" "For everything. For saving me that night when I thought I was saving you. For giving me a family. For transforming the Blackwell curse into a blessing." Sarah smiled, tired but radiant. "I think it was destiny. Some stories need generations to be corrected." "Some stories need the right characters," he corrected gently, his fingers tracing the delicate profile of his son. "And now our little James will grow up knowing only love. No secrets, no violence, no empire of lies to inherit. He'll grow up free," Sarah completed, "as his grandmother dreamed you would grow up." Little James stirred in his sleep, his lips moving as if nursing in dreams. Outside, the first rays of sun began to gild the horizon, announcing a new day, a new beginning. Martha entered silently to change the towels, pausing a moment to observe the scene. In all her years serving the Blackwell family, she had never seen so much love in a single room. It was as if all the shadows of the past had finally been dispelled by the light of this new life. "You know," she said softly, "they say children born on wedding days are blessed with a special love. A love that heals generations." Ethan smiled, his eyes never leaving his son's face. "He's already healing. Each breath he takes is like a new beginning. Each beat of his heart is a promise fulfilled." Sarah closed her eyes, letting herself be enveloped by the warmth of her new family. Elizabeth's dress still wrapped her body like an embrace distant in time. The rings on their fingers gleamed with the morning light, and in her arms a new generation of Blackwells breathed the pure air of freedom. It was more than a happy ending. It was a perfect new beginning. The first rays of the morning sun found Ethan awake in the armchair next to the bed, watching Sarah and James sleep. A week had passed since the birth, and each moment seemed charged with a particular magic. The room, now transformed into a welcoming nest, had the soft aroma of lavender and mother's milk, mixed with the scent of the roses that James brought every day for his grandson. A movement on the bed caught his attention. Sarah was waking up, her eyes opening slowly while she instinctively checked on little James nestled against her chest. "How long have you been watching me?" she asked with a sleepy smile. "Long enough to thank the universe about 1,000 times," Ethan replied, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. "The two of you sleeping look like a Renaissance painting." Sarah laughed softly, taking care not to wake the baby. "A very disheveled painting, you mean? My hair must be a bird's nest." "A perfect nest." He leaned in to kiss her, a soft kiss that carried all the love in the world. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, happy, complete." She adjusted James in her arms when the little one began to stir, instinctively seeking his mother's breast. "It's strange. After so much fear, so much violence, now everything seems so peaceful." Ethan observed in silence as Sarah nursed their son, marveling at the naturalness of the gesture, at the deep connection between mother and child. James had his eyes open now, that intense green inherited from Elizabeth fixed on his mother's, face with an almost supernatural intensity for such a small baby. "I received news from Washington this morning," he said after a moment. "Victoria's trial has begun. She's cooperating with the investigations, revealing the entire Thompson corruption network." Sarah tensed slightly. "And David? He'll spend a long time in prison. The evidence is overwhelming, not just of the violence against you, but of numerous other crimes." He took her free hand, intertwining their fingers. "He'll never be able to hurt you again. Or our son." James released the breast at that moment, satisfied, and Ethan took him with a gentleness that contrasted with his normally controlled posture. It was fascinating to see how the man who had once commanded a wine empire now melted completely before such a small being. "Martha is preparing breakfast," he said, positioning his son to burp with a practice that improved each day. "And James called. He's coming to spend the weekend." "He's different," Sarah observed. "Lighter, more alive." "Little James is healing all of us," Ethan replied, his eyes fixed on his son, who now slept on his shoulder. "It's as if he were a gift from the past to the future, a bridge between what was lost and what can be built." A sound of a car in the driveway interrupted the conversation. Minutes later, Martha appeared at the door of the room, her normally composed face showing signs of agitation. "Master Ethan, there's someone here who wants to see you." Before they could ask who it was, a familiar figure appeared behind the housekeeper. It was Victoria, not the elegant and manipulative Victoria they knew, but a softer, almost vulnerable version. She stopped at the door, her eyes fixed on the baby in Ethan's arms. I came to ask forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling. "Before beginning my sentence, I needed to understand." Sarah felt Ethan tense, his arms tightening protectively around James, but it was she who responded. "Understand? What? What true love is?" Victoria took a hesitant step into the room. "All my life I thought love was power, that family was a business to be managed. But seeing you now, seeing this child..." Tears began to run down her face. "I understand why I lost. Why I had to lose." The silence that followed was heavy with untold truths, with regrets and lost possibilities. It was James who broke it, letting out a small sigh in his sleep that seemed to melt something in the tense environment. "You didn't lose, Victoria," Sarah said softly. "You freed yourself. Like all of us." Victoria nodded, wiping away the tears. "I also came to bring this." She extended an envelope to Ethan. "They're the deeds to the vineyard in Napa Valley. It was rightfully yours, always was. I was just trying to maintain a control I never really had." Ethan took the envelope with his free hand, but didn't open it. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Whatever you want. Sell it, transform it into a cooperative like you did here, burn it. It's your right to choose." Victoria took one last look at James. "He's beautiful. He has your mother's eyes. The eyes you inherited. Eyes of someone who knows how to love." Before anyone could respond, she turned and quickly left, the sound of her heels echoing down the corridor like a reminder of a life that now belonged to the past. Martha brought breakfast shortly after, a generous tray with fresh fruits, warm bread, coffee, and orange juice. As they ate in bed with James sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, Sarah noticed something different in Ethan's face. "What are you thinking about?" "The Napa Valley Vineyard," he replied after a moment. "I've been thinking, maybe we could transform it into something new, a healing place perhaps, a retreat for families with organic vineyards and social programs." Sarah smiled, immediately understanding. "A place where other stories can be rewritten?" "Exactly." He took her hand, kissing each finger delicately. "We could spend a few months of the year there, show our son that there's beauty beyond the mountains of Colorado, that there's healing beyond pain. And James? He would come with us, of course. Martha, too, if she wants." Ethan smiled. "Family is family, no matter where it is." James chose that moment to wake up, his small face contorting before letting out a cry that was quickly attended to by Sarah. As he watched his wife nurse their son, Ethan felt a peace he had never known before. Outside, the sun rose in the sky, painting the gardens in tones of gold. Somewhere on the road, James was probably already on his way, eager for another weekend with his newly discovered family. And there, in that room that had witnessed the beginning of his new life, Ethan Blackwell finally understood the true meaning of heritage. It wasn't vineyards or fortunes, it wasn't names or traditions. It was love, pure and simple, the kind of love that survives generations, that transforms curses into blessings, that builds bridges over abysses of pain. The kind of love that, like the most precious wine, only gets better with time. Autumn came to the mountains, bringing a palette of colors that transformed the landscape into an impressionist canvas. James was 3 months old, and his growth seemed to accompany the changes in nature. Each day brought a new discovery, a new smile, a new way to enchant everyone around him. On that particular morning, Sarah found Ethan in the office, surrounded by plans and projects spread over the old desk. He raised his eyes when she entered, his face lighting up as it always did when he saw her. The projects for the Napa Valley vineyard arrived, he explained, pulling her onto his lap while indicating the drawings. The architect managed to incorporate all our ideas. See, this will be the recovery center for women victims of violence, integrated with the organic vineyards. Sarah studied the projects, marveling at the proposed transformation. The old vineyard, once a symbol of power and tradition, would be converted into a space of healing and renewal. The vineyards would be maintained, but now they would serve as part of a therapeutic program, where working with the land would help in the healing process. "It's perfect," she whispered, kissing his neck. "When do the renovations begin?" "In 2 weeks. James is already organizing his move to supervise. Everything up close." Ethan smiled. He's more excited than a child at Christmas. Said he always dreamed of living in California. The sound of infant laughter interrupted the conversation. Martha appeared at the office door with James in her arms, the little one dressed in a yellow romper that highlighted his golden skin. "Look who woke up from his nap wanting his parents," the housekeeper announced, handing the baby to Sarah. James immediately grabbed a lock of his mother's hair, his green eyes, so identical to his father's, shining with that infinite curiosity that was his trademark. Ethan adjusted his arms to accommodate mother and son in his lap, forming a perfect cocoon of love and protection. "Have you told him yet?" Martha asked with a conspiratorial smile. Sarah shook her head. "I was waiting for the right moment." "Told me what?" Ethan asked, his attention divided between the conversation and James's attempts to reach his tie. "That," Sarah made a dramatic pause, turning to face him, "that James will have a little brother or sister in approximately 7 months. The silence that followed was broken only by James's giggle, as if the little one understood the magnitude of the moment. Ethan remained completely still for a few seconds, his wide eyes fixed on Sarah's face. You're sure?" Sarah nodded, tears of happiness beginning to form in her eyes. "Dr. Rebecca confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment to tell you." The kiss Ethan gave her then was so full of love that it made Martha discreetly leave the office, taking with her the sound of her emotional crying. James protested at being squeezed between his parents, his small hands hitting Ethan's face as if to say, "Hey, I'm still here." "Another baby," he whispered when they finally separated, his voice choked with emotion. "Our family is growing." "Scared?" "Happy," he corrected, kissing the top of James's head. "Incredibly, absolutely happy." The rest of the afternoon was filled with plans and dreams. James was informed by telephone and immediately began making plans to postpone his trip to California. "I'm not going to miss the birth of another grandchild," he declared categorically. Martha spent hours on the phone with her network of contacts, ensuring that all the traditional superstitions and prayers for a healthy pregnancy were carried out. The housekeeper had become even more protective since James's birth, treating Sarah as if she were her own daughter. At nightfall, with James finally sleeping in his crib, Sarah and Ethan took refuge on the house's porch. The air was perfumed with jasmine, and the first mist of the night was beginning to rise from the valley, creating an almost mystical setting. "I never thought it would be possible," Ethan said softly, his hand resting on Sarah's still flat belly. "What?" "So much happiness, so much love." He pulled her closer. "When you appeared that rainy night, I was convinced that my destiny was solitude, that the Blackwell name was a curse that condemned me to repeat the mistakes of the past." Sarah turned in his arms, touching his face with tenderness. "And now? Now. I know that some loves have the power to break curses, to transform stories of pain into fairy tales." He kissed her forehead. "You and James, and now this new baby. You are my redemption, my particular miracle." "It's not a miracle," she smiled. "It's destiny. Some souls are destined to meet each other, to heal each other." A soft cry came from the bedroom and both smiled. James had a sixth sense for romantic moments between his parents. "Your turn," Sarah laughed, pushing him gently. Ethan stood up, but before going in, he stopped and looked at his wife. Beautiful in the moonlight, her hands resting protectively on the womb where a new life was beginning to grow. "I love you," he said simply. "More than wine, more than empires, more than life." "I love you too," she replied. "More than fear, more than pain, more than time." As Ethan went to attend to James, Sarah remained on the porch, watching the stars begin to dot the dark sky. Somewhere in the house, Martha was humming an old lullaby. In the garden, the jasmines that had witnessed their wedding continued to bloom, perfuming the night with promises of eternity. And in her womb, a new story was beginning to be written, a story of love, of courage, of redemption, a story that proved that sometimes the greatest treasures are born from the greatest wounds, that true love doesn't just heal, it transforms, renews, recreates, and that some happy endings are just the beginning of even more extraordinary stories.